It was a chilly, crisp evening in New York City. String lights glimmered like stars along the edge of the rooftop restaurant, casting a warm glow over the tables. Amira Wilson adjusted the hem of her velvet maroon dress for the 5th time, her palms slightly damp. She hated how nervous she felt. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. The anticipation swirled in her chest like a storm, but there was a spark of excitement too. Reece Parker, her boyfriend of 2 years, was finally going to propose. Or so she believed. She had noticed subtle changes in him over the past few weeks. He had been more thoughtful, asking about her dreams, their future. He even hinted at a big surprise coming soon. Amira's best friend Layla had been sure of it. "Girl, he's definitely going to put a ring on it," Layla had gushed. Amira smiled at the memory, twirling the delicate gold bracelet she had custom-made for Reece. It was engraved with the words, "Together, always." But something felt off. Reece arrived 15 minutes late, his usual confident stride missing. He wore his signature black blazer, but his face seemed distracted, his eyes darting around the room as if he expected someone to be watching them. When he kissed her cheek, it was brief. Too brief. He sat down across from her and checked his phone almost immediately. "Hey," she said softly, tilting her head to catch his gaze. "Everything okay?" Yeah, just work stuff," he replied with a half-hearted smile. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, but his leg bounced nervously under the table. He glanced at the exit before refocusing on her. Amira tried to ignore the discomfort settling in her gut. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small velvet box containing the bracelet. "I got you something," she said, her voice bright with hope. Reece froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to. It's to remind us of everything we've built together." She opened the box, revealing the bracelet under the soft glow of candlelight. His smile faltered for a second, so quick she almost missed it. He cleared his throat and nodded, taking the box from her hands. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "Thank you." Amira waited for him to say more, to reciprocate the gesture in some way. But instead, his phone buzzed on the table. He stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. Without giving her time to respond, he stepped away toward the far corner of the terrace, phone pressed to his ear. Amira watched his back, confusion and hurt twisting inside her. Minutes passed. The warmth of the evening faded into a cold tension as she sat alone, her mind racing. Was this the surprise? Had she misread everything? She tried to calm herself, convincing herself that it was just work like he'd said. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. When Reece returned, his expression was unreadable. He offered a rushed apology, claiming an urgent matter had come up. "I have to go," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Wait. What? Reece, what's going on? You're leaving." "I'll explain later, I promise." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, but it felt distant, mechanical. "We'll talk soon." Before she could protest, he was already walking away, his figure disappearing down the stairwell. Amira sat frozen in place, the festive glow of the restaurant suddenly feeling hollow. Around her, other couples laughed and clinked glasses, oblivious to her unravelling world. She glanced at the bracelet still resting in its box and felt a pang of bitterness. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. The cold breeze from the rooftop seemed to follow Amira all the way home, biting at her skin as she entered her apartment. The usual comfort of her cozy space, soft cushions, warm fairy lights strung around the windows, felt strangely suffocating tonight. She tossed her clutch onto the couch and sank into its plush cushions, staring at the floor as if it held the answers she couldn't find. Her mind raced with unanswered questions, each one more painful than the last. Her phone buzzed beside her. She snatched it up, hoping it was Reece with an apology and explanation, anything to undo the sinking feeling in her chest. But it was just a message from Layla. "So did he do it? Are you engaged?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could she even say? She typed, deleted, and typed again before settling on no. He left early. Something felt off. Almost immediately, the phone rang. "What do you mean, he left?" Layla's voice was sharp, protective, like a friend ready to go to battle. Amira sighed, curling into the couch. "He said he had a work emergency. But, Layla, it wasn't just that. He was acting weird all night, like he didn't even want to be there. And then he got a call and just left." There was a pause on the other end. "That doesn't sound like Reece. Are you sure he's not just stressed about work?" "That's what he said." Amira chewed on her lip, her voice softening. "But it felt bigger than that. When I gave him the bracelet, he looked guilty." "Guilty?" Layla's tone sharpened with suspicion. "Girl, listen to me. If he's acting weird and leaving you at dinner without a real explanation, something's going on. You need to find out what." "I don't want to jump to conclusions," Amira replied, though doubt gnawed at her. She wanted to believe Reece was the man she thought she knew, but her gut, that persistent, nagging voice inside, told her otherwise. "Conclusions? You're not jumping anywhere. You're just being smart," Layla insisted. "Check his social media. See if he's been tagged anywhere or if there's anything suspicious." Amira hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll look." After hanging up, she opened her laptop and pulled up Reece's Instagram. His profile was as polished as ever. Photos of him at networking events, charity galas, and scenic trips they had taken together. Nothing seemed unusual, but just as she was about to close the page, a notification popped up, tagged in a post by @Nina Andrews NYC. Her heart skipped a beat as she clicked the tag. It led to a photo of Reece at what appeared to be an upscale hotel lobby, standing near a striking woman with long chestnut hair and a tailored red dress that hugged her curves like it was designed specifically for her. The caption read, "Business meeting with the one and only Reece Parker. Exciting things ahead." Amira's stomach flipped. Who was this woman, and why did she feel like her world had just tilted sideways? The woman's profile revealed little, just carefully curated posts showing luxurious locations, designer outfits, and cryptic captions like, "The art of subtle victory is knowing when to strike." Her fingers trembled as she clicked through more photos. Her breath hitched when she stumbled upon another picture, posted just a week ago. It was a candid shot of the same woman sitting at an outdoor cafe, laughing with someone whose face was partially obscured. But Amira recognized that watch. The silver Rolex with the engraved dial. It was Reece's. Her throat tightened. He had never mentioned this woman, this meeting, or why he'd been at that cafe. The image blurred in her vision as tears pricked her eyes. Was this just business? Or had it been more all along? Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her spiral. It was Layla. "Well?" Layla asked, urgency in her voice. "There's a woman," Amira whispered, her voice cracking. "Nina Andrews. He was with her at a hotel, and there's this photo." "Layla, what if he's cheating on me?" Silence hung between them, heavy like the weight pressing on Amira's chest. "We don't know that for sure," Layla finally said, though even she sounded unsure. "But you need to find out. Don't let this eat at you. Call him." Amira wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "I can't call him. Not yet. I need to know what I'm dealing with first." Her eyes flicked back to the screen, to Nina's profile. The woman seemed untouchable, like someone who played with secrets for fun. Amira's mind spun with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Without thinking, she opened Reece's text messages on her phone, scrolling past their conversations to one she hadn't noticed before. It was saved under work, but there was nothing professional about it. The messages were brief and cryptic. Nina, I hope you didn't forget what's at stake. Reece, I haven't. We'll handle it. Nina, good. Because time's running out. Her blood ran cold. Time's running out. The same words she'd seen flash on his phone during dinner. Her world spun faster, spiraling into chaos as she realised that everything she thought she knew about Reece was crumbling beneath her. The man she loved wasn't just hiding something, he was drowning in secrets, and Amira was about to get pulled under with him. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through Amira's bedroom blinds, casting stripes of light across the floor. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment from the night before. She couldn't shake the image of Reece standing next to Nina Andrews, or the cryptic messages lurking on his phone. Her instincts had never screamed this loudly before. Something wasn't right. By the time she got out of bed and poured herself a cup of coffee, her resolve had hardened. She wasn't going to sit around waiting for answers to come to her. If Reece wasn't willing to tell her the truth, she'd find it herself. With a determined breath, she grabbed her coat, slipped on her boots, and headed out the door. The brisk February air hit her face like a slap, but she welcomed it. It woke her up, sharpened her senses. Her first stop was Layla's apartment. When her friend opened the door, she was still in her pajamas, hair tied up in a messy bun, a cup of herbal tea in her hand. "Girl, you look like you're on a mission," Layla said, stepping aside to let her in. "I am," Amira replied, brushing past her. "I need to know what Reece is hiding, and I can't do it alone." Layla arched a brow and set her tea down. "So, what's the plan? Stake out hidden cameras? Should I be worried you're about to break the law?" Amira laughed, but it was bitter. "Not yet, but if it comes to that, I'll let you know." She sank onto Layla's couch and pulled out her phone, showing her the messages between Reece and Nina. "This is what I found. They've been in contact for weeks, maybe months. I just don't know what they're working on or what this deadline is about." Layla's eyes widened as she scrolled through the texts. "Damn, this isn't just a random side hustle, it's something big." "That's what scares me," Amira said quietly. "And it's not just the messages. There's an offshore bank account I found referenced on his laptop last night. I don't know where the money is coming from or where it's going." Layla leaned back, tapping her fingers against her thigh. "Okay, let's think this through. You said Nina's some businesswoman, right? Maybe whatever they're working on is tied to that. What do we know about her?" "Not much," Amira admitted. "Just what I saw on her Instagram. She's well-connected, rich, and definitely not shy about flaunting it." "Then it's time to dig deeper." Layla grabbed her laptop from the coffee table and pulled up Nina's LinkedIn profile. "Let's see. CEO of a luxury investment firm, major shareholder in multiple startups, and a board member at... Whoa, wait a second." "What?" Amira leaned forward, her heart pounding. Layla turned the screen toward her. "She's on the board of Parker Financial Group." Amira's breath caught in her throat. "Reece's father's company." "Exactly," Layla said, her eyes narrowing. "Now it's starting to make sense. What if this isn't just about business? What if it's about Reece's family?" The puzzle pieces clicked into place in Amira's mind, but the picture they formed was far from comforting. Reece had always been private about his family's financial struggles after his father passed away. He rarely talked about the debts his father left behind or the pressure of trying to keep the family legacy afloat. But if Nina was involved in that world, it meant Reece had dragged Amira into something far more dangerous than she'd realised. Her phone buzzed, startling her. She checked the screen. It was Reece. Her fingers hovered over the answer button, but she didn't press it. "Are you going to pick up?" Layla asked cautiously. "No," Amira shook her head. "I'm not ready to talk to him yet. Not until I know the truth." Layla exhaled slowly, folding her arms. "Okay, but be careful, Amira. If Reece is hiding something this big, it could get messy." "It already is," Amira muttered. She stood, pacing the room as her mind raced. She needed to get closer to Nina, to figure out what role she played in Reece's life and whether it went beyond business. There had to be a way to meet her, to force a confrontation that would give her answers. Layla seemed to read her thoughts. "You're thinking about confronting Nina, aren't you?" Amira stopped pacing and met her friend's gaze. "I don't have a choice. She's the key to everything." Layla sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't like it, but I get it. Just promise me you won't do anything reckless." "I won't," Amira said, though she wasn't sure she believed herself. She'd crossed the line from confusion into obsession, and she couldn't stop now. With a new plan forming in her mind, she left Layla's apartment and headed back into the cold streets. She pulled out her phone and searched for upcoming events where Nina Andrews might be attending. It didn't take long. There was a charity gala that night at the Grand Manhattan Hotel, an event Nina had posted about on her Instagram just 2 days ago. Amira's hands trembled as she booked herself a ticket. If she wanted answers, she was going to get them face to face. And if Reece's betrayal went deeper than she feared, she was ready to find out just how far it went. The evening air carried a biting chill as Amira stepped out of the cab and approached the Grand Manhattan Hotel. The building loomed above her, its grand architecture glowing under golden lights that reflected off the polished marble entrance. A line of luxury cars pulled up with finely dressed guests stepping out in designer gowns and tailored suits. The elegance of the scene was almost suffocating, but Amira straightened her posture, determined to blend in. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, the kind of outfit that radiated quiet confidence, but didn't scream for attention. Her hair was swept into a low bun, and she'd chosen minimal jewellery, just enough to fit the atmosphere. As she entered the hotel, her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one woman who held the answers to everything unravelling in her life. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and she grabbed a glass, more to steady her nerves than to actually drink. Her fingers trembled slightly around the delicate stem. Her heart pounded as she imagined the confrontation ahead. What if Nina denied everything? What if she saw through Amira's act and shut her out completely? The grand ballroom was a sea of shimmering gowns, glittering chandeliers, and conversations masked by polite laughter. Amira moved through the crowd, offering brief nods to strangers, while her mind stayed laser-focused on finding Nina. She passed tables adorned with floral centerpieces and wealthy donors discussing investments and art auctions. Everything about this place was polished to perfection, but underneath it, Amira could feel the hidden tension, secrets buried just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Then she saw her. Nina Andrews stood near the bar, effortlessly captivating those around her. Her long chestnut hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her crimson gown made her look like she owned the room. Amira's breath caught in her throat. Up close, Nina was even more intimidating, her smile sharp and calculated. She laughed softly at something a man said before taking a sip of her martini, her eyes scanning the crowd as if she were always aware of being watched. Amira hesitated, her mind running through different ways to approach her. Should she play it cool, pretend to be a curious admirer, or go straight for the truth? Before she could decide, Nina's gaze locked onto her, as if sensing the weight of Amira's presence. Their eyes met. Amira's pulse quickened, but she held Nina's gaze, refusing to back down. Slowly, Nina excused herself from the conversation and sauntered toward her, the heels of her stilettos clicking softly against the marble floor. The distance between them closed too quickly, leaving Amira feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Are you lost, darling?" Nina's voice was smooth, almost seductive, like someone who enjoyed playing with her prey before striking. Amira forced a polite smile. "Not at all. I've been wanting to meet you." Nina tilted her head, amused. "Have you? Now I don't believe we've been introduced." Amira extended her hand, keeping her expression neutral. "Amira Wilson." Nina's lips curved into a smile, but there was something predatory about it. "Ah, the infamous Amira. I was wondering when you'd show up." The words hit her like a slap, but Amira didn't flinch. "Infamous, I didn't realize I had that kind of reputation." "Oh, you do," Nina replied, swirling her martini lazily before taking another sip. "Reece talks about you often." Amira's stomach knotted, but she kept her tone steady. "I'm sure he does. What exactly does he say?" Nina's gaze sharpened, as if testing how much Amira already knew. "Enough for me to understand why you're here tonight. You're curious, aren't you? Wondering why your perfect boyfriend has been keeping secrets." Amira's grip on her champagne glass tightened. "I don't appreciate games, Nina. If you know something, say it." Nina chuckled softly, setting her martini on the bar. "Oh, Amira, you're already in the middle of the game. Whether you appreciate it or not doesn't matter." Amira's breath hitched, but she didn't let the panic show. "What is this game about? Then his father's debts, the offshore accounts, or is it just you two playing with people's lives?" Nina leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's about survival. Reece isn't who you think he is. He's desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. I tried to warn him, but he's in too deep now." Amira's throat tightened. "What are you talking about? What's he in too deep with?" "Money," Nina said simply, her eyes gleaming. "His father's company was drowning in debt long before his death, but I'm sure you already knew that. What you don't know is that Reece made a deal with me to save it. A risky deal. And if he can't deliver what I need, let's just say the consequences won't be pretty." Amira's heart pounded against her ribcage. "Deliver what? What does he owe you?" Nina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Connections, favours, and access to your family's network. That's why he needed you, Amira. You were part of the plan from the start." The room spun around her. Amira took a step back, her mind struggling to process the betrayal. Her chest felt like it was caving in. Reece had used her. The man she loved, the man she had dreamed of building a life with, had pulled her into a web of lies. Nina watched her reaction with the same cold amusement, like a cat toying with a trapped mouse. "It wasn't personal," she added, as if that could soften the blow. "But don't feel too bad. I think he actually fell for you somewhere along the way." Tears pricked at the corners of Amira's eyes, but she blinked them away. She wouldn't cry in front of Nina. Not here. Not now. Instead, she swallowed the lump in her throat and steadied her voice. "I'm not some pawn in your game, Nina, and I'm done being a part of this." "Are you?" Nina asked, her smile unfaltering. "Then I suggest you move quickly, because once I'm finished with Reece, there won't be anything left of him to save." Amira didn't respond. She turned on her heel, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the marble as she left the ballroom. Her mind buzzed with a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and a newfound resolve. Reece had betrayed her, but she wasn't going to let him or Nina destroy everything. If they wanted a game, she was about to play it her way. The cold night air hit Amira like a slap as she stepped outside the Grand Manhattan Hotel. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her chest heaving as she fought to control the storm of emotions inside her. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of Nina's words echoing in her mind. "You were a part of the plan from the start, She wanted to scream, cry, maybe even throw her phone across the street. But she knew none of that would help her. Instead, she inhaled sharply, steadying herself. The sidewalk was bustling with people. Couples leaving the gala, tourists snapping pictures, cabs honking as they navigated the chaotic streets. But to Amira, the world felt distant, muffled, like she was trapped underwater. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. For a moment, she debated ignoring it. But when she saw Reece's name flash across the screen, her rage ignited. She answered. "What do you want, Reece?" she snapped, walking briskly down the street as her heels clicked against the pavement. "Amira," he said, his voice breathless as though he had been running. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you." "Funny, considering you've had plenty of time to reach out to Nina Andrews instead," she bit back, her tone venomous. There was a pause on the other end. "You went to the gala, didn't you?" His voice dropped, filled with a mixture of disbelief and panic. "I did," she confirmed. "And guess what? I had a lovely chat with Nina. Learned some interesting things, like how you've been using me to save your precious company. Were you going to tell me, or was I just supposed to figure it out when everything came crashing down?" "Amira, it's not what you think," he started, but she cut him off. "Don't you dare lie to me again," she hissed, stopping in her tracks. The noise of the city blurred into the background as she gripped her phone tightly. "I trusted you, Reece. I thought we were building a life together. But all this time, you were just playing me." His voice cracked with desperation. "I wasn't playing you. Yes, it started that way, but it changed. I fell in love with you. I never meant to hurt you." Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You don't get to use love as an excuse for betrayal." "I was trying to protect you," he pleaded. "You don't understand how bad things were after my dad died. We were drowning. Nina offered me a way out, and I thought I could manage it without you ever finding out. I was wrong." "Yeah, you were," she said bitterly. "And now I'm the one paying the price for your mistakes." There was silence on the other end, but she could hear his breathing, shallow and panicked. "Please, Amira, meet me. Let me explain everything." "I don't think there's anything left to explain," she whispered, her voice cracking despite her best effort to stay strong. "Just give me a chance," he begged. "One chance to make this right. Meet me at the park. 10 minutes. If you still want to walk away after that, I won't stop you." Amira closed her eyes, her mind warring with itself. Part of her wanted to hang up and walk away, to leave him and all the pain behind. But the other part, the part that still loved him despite everything, needed to know the full truth. She needed closure, one way or another. "Fine," she said after a long pause. 10 minutes. She ended the call and flagged down a cab. As the driver weaved through traffic, her heart raced faster than the cars around her. By the time they pulled up to the entrance of Central Park, she felt like she was on the verge of collapse. She paid the driver and stepped out, her breath visible in the cold night air. The park was quieter than usual, the pathways lit by dim lamps that cast long shadows across the ground. Reece was waiting for her by a bench near the fountain. His coat was unbuttoned and his hair was slightly dishevelled, as though he had been running his hands through it. He looked up as she approached, relief flooding his expression. But Amira didn't soften. She crossed her arms and kept her distance. "Talk," she said coldly. He exhaled, his breath fogging up in the frigid air. "I didn't plan this, Amira. When I met you, Nina had already cornered me. My dad's debts were worse than I thought. She offered to bail me out, but the deal came with strings. She wanted access to people with influence, people like your family. And you thought you could use me to get that," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "At first, yes," he admitted, his voice pained. But then I fell for you and everything changed. I wanted to protect you from the mess I'd created. I tried to pull away from Nina, but she wouldn't let me. She threatened to ruin me, to drag you down with me if I didn't deliver. Amira's throat tightened as she processed his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that his love had been real, but trust wasn't something she could give freely anymore. So you just kept lying to me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was scared, he said, stepping closer. Scared of losing you, of what Nina would do if I failed. I made bad choices, but I never stopped loving you. I still love you, Amira. Tears slipped down her cheeks, warm against the cold air. She hated that his words still had the power to hurt her, to make her heart ache even after everything he'd done. Love isn't supposed to feel like this, she whispered. I know, he said, his voice breaking, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll cut ties with Nina. I'll face whatever consequences come. Just don't walk away from me. For a moment, she stood there silent, her mind spinning with memories of their time together. The laughter, the quiet nights, the dreams they had shared. But those memories were now tainted, tangled in a web of deceit that she wasn't sure she could untangle. I don't know if I can trust you again, she finally said, her voice shaking. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. I understand. The silence between them was deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. Amira wiped her tears and took a step back, creating distance between them. I need time, she said, and you need to clean up the mess you've made. If you really love me, you'll fix this without dragging me down with you. He opened his mouth to speak, but she shook her head. Don't. Just let me go for now. And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She had to keep moving forward, even if her heart was shattering with every step. The days that followed felt like an endless blur of quiet anguish and restless nights. Amira moved through her life on autopilot, going through the motions of work, but her mind was trapped in a spiral of memories, questions, and what-ifs. The apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on her with every passing hour. Reece's absence haunted her. His texts came every day, short, pleading messages asking if she was okay, asking to see her. She ignored them all. She wasn't ready. Not yet. On the fifth night, as rain tapped gently against her window, Amira lay curled up on her couch, her laptop balanced on her knees. She had spent hours researching Nina, Parker, Financial Group, and the web of connections that had sucked Reece into this mess. Every article she read only deepened her sense of betrayal. There were rumours of insider deals, hidden investments, and legal battles that were quietly swept under the rug. Nina's name was mentioned more than once, always tied to whispers of manipulation and power plays. But one article caught her attention, making her breath hitch. It detailed a failed merger between Parker Financial and another firm, one that had collapsed due to a sudden withdrawal of capital. The loss had left Parker Financial in shambles, but there was something peculiar about the timing. The withdrawal had happened shortly after Reece's father died, and the company that had pulled out, it was owned by Nina Andrews. Amira's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about Reece making bad decisions to save his family's company. Nina had orchestrated their downfall from the beginning. She had been circling Parker Financial like a vulture, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and Reece had been her perfect pawn. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Layla's number. It rang twice before her friend picked up, sounding groggy. Amira, it's late. What's wrong? I figured it out, Amira said, her voice a mixture of shock and urgency. Nina didn't just offer Reece a deal to save the company. She was the reason they needed saving in the first place. What? Layla's voice sharpened instantly. Explain. Amira paced the living room as she spoke, her words tumbling out. Nina pulled funding from a major deal after Reece's dad died. It wasn't just bad luck or market timing, it was deliberate. She created the crisis and then dangled a lifeline in front of Reece, knowing he'd be desperate enough to take it. Layla let out a low whistle. That's next-level evil. So, what are you going to do? I don't know, Amira admitted, sinking onto the couch. But I can't let her keep manipulating him. If I walk away and do nothing, she'll destroy him. And Her voice broke. I still care about him, Layla. As much as I hate what he did, I can't just watch him crash and burn. There was a pause on the other end before Layla sighed. Then you need to talk to him. For real this time. Not to cry or accuse him, but to figure out how to get him out of this. Amira wiped a tear from her cheek. You're right. I'll call him tomorrow. But the next morning, before she could reach for her phone, someone knocked on her door. Her heart leapt, half hoping it was Reece, but when she opened it, she found herself face to face with Nina Andrews. Nina stood there, perfectly poised, wearing a tailored black coat with a silk scarf draped loosely around her neck. Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes were cold, calculating. Good morning, Amira. I thought it was time we had another chat. Amira's breath caught. She tightened her grip on the door, leaning slightly against the frame. What are you doing here? Don't worry, I'm not here to cause a scene, Nina said, her voice smooth as velvet. I just thought we should clear the air before you make any rash decisions. I have nothing to say to you, Amira snapped, her fingers gripping the edge of the door tighter. But I have plenty to say to you, Nina replied, her smile unfaltering. May I come in, or would you prefer we discuss this on your doorstep, where your neighbours can overhear? Amira hesitated for a moment before stepping aside and allowing Nina inside. She led her to the living room, where Nina gracefully lowered herself onto the couch, crossing her legs elegantly. Amira remained standing, arms folded tightly across her chest. Make it quick, Amira said coldly. Nina adjusted her scarf as if she had all the time in the world. I know you've been digging into my background. Impressive work, by the way, but before you get any ideas about being the hero of this story, let me give you some advice. Stay out of it. Amira's jaw tightened. I'm not staying out of anything. I know what you did to Parker Financial. I know you trapped Reece in this mess. Nina chuckled softly as though she found Amira's defiance amusing. Oh, sweetheart, Reece trapped himself the moment he let his emotions cloud his judgment. I simply gave him the push he needed. Why? Amira demanded. Why destroy his family's company and then pretend to help him? Because I could, Nina said, her smile fading into something more sinister. Because his father made enemies in this world, and when he died, the debts came due. Reece thought he could outsmart me, but he didn't understand how the game works, and now neither do you. Amira's hands balled into fists at her sides. If you think I'm going to let you ruin him any further, you're wrong. Nina stood, brushing off her coat as if the conversation had been nothing more than a formality. You're in over your head, Amira. Walk away while you still can, because if you keep meddling, I'll make sure you regret it. She moved towards the door, but before she left, she turned back, her gaze colder than ever. You think Reece can be saved, but the truth is he's already destroyed. The sooner you realise that, the easier this will be. The door closed behind her, leaving Amira standing in the middle of the room, her heart racing. But instead of fear, she felt something else rising within her determination. Nina was wrong. Reece wasn't beyond saving, and Amira was about to prove it. That evening, Amira sat by her window, the city lights casting a soft glow across her apartment. Her mind buzzed, but her emotions had hardened into something unbreakable. Nina thought she could intimidate her into walking away, but that was her first mistake. Amira wasn't running, not when the man she loved, despite everything, was standing on the edge of ruin. She wasn't ready to forgive Reece, but she wasn't about to let him be destroyed either. The knock on her door came just as she'd expected. This time, it was Reece. When she opened the door, he looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He stepped inside hesitantly, waiting for her to shut the door before he spoke. "Amira, I'm so sorry." "Save it," she cut him off, holding up a hand. "We don't have time for apologies." Reece blinked, clearly taken aback by her sudden shift in tone. "What do you mean?" "I know everything," she said, walking past him into the living room. "I know Nina orchestrated the downfall of your father's company. I know she trapped you with promises of saving it. And I know she's using you as a pawn in some twisted power game." Reece stood frozen for a moment before sinking into the armchair across from her. He rubbed his hands over his face, sighing heavily. "I didn't want you to get pulled into this." "Well, guess what, I'm already in it," she said sharply. "Nina came to my apartment this morning to threaten me. She thinks I'll back off." Reece's head snapped up. "She came here. What did she say?" "She told me you're beyond saving," Amira said, her gaze locking onto his. "She said I should walk away before I get hurt. But I'm not walking away, Reece. I'm going to help you, whether you like it or not." He shook his head, his voice strained. "You don't understand what you're getting into. Nina's not just powerful, she's dangerous. If you go up against her, she'll destroy you too." "Let her try," Amira shot back, leaning forward. "I'm not scared of her, but you should be scared of losing everything if we don't act now. We need to take back control before she pulls the rug out from under you completely." Reece was silent for a moment, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I don't even know where to start." "I do," she said. "We need to find proof that Nina manipulated the company's finances before your father died. If we can prove that she sabotaged the merger and used insider knowledge to trap you, we can expose her." Reece looked at her, a mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. "How do we find that kind of proof?" Amira took a deep breath. "Your father's old files, any contracts, financial records, or correspondence between him and Nina's company. Something has to be there." Reece nodded slowly. "I think I know where some of those files might be. My dad kept a storage unit with all of his important documents. I haven't touched it since he passed, but if there's anything that can help us, it'll be there." "Then we go there tonight," Amira said firmly, standing up and grabbing her coat. "We don't have time to waste." They left the apartment without another word, the tension between them unspoken, but understood. As they drove through the city in Reece's car, Amira stared out the window, her mind racing. This was their one shot. If they didn't find something useful, Nina would win, and Reece would be left with nothing but the wreckage of his family's legacy. The storage facility was tucked away in a quiet industrial part of the city. The air was cold, the kind that stung your skin and made you wish for warmer days. Reece unlocked the storage unit and they stepped inside. The fluorescent lights flickered on, revealing rows of boxes stacked neatly against the walls. Amira shivered slightly as she scanned the room. "Where should we start?" "Over here," Reece said, moving toward a stack labelled Parker, Financial, Confidential. They began sifting through files, papers rustling as they worked in silence. Amira's fingers were numb from the cold, but she didn't stop. Contracts, investment proposals, Legal letters, most of it seemed irrelevant. But then, just as she was beginning to lose hope, she found it. A series of emails printed and stapled together. The sender was Nina Andrews, and the dates lined up perfectly with the failed merger. Her eyes scanned the messages quickly, her heart pounding. One line stood out like a flashing warning sign. Withdraw the capital as soon as possible. Timing is critical. We'll have more leverage when the company collapses. Reece, she breathed, handing him the papers. This is it. Proof that she pulled the funding on purpose. He stared at the emails, his hand shaking slightly. She planned it all, he whispered. She destroyed us. But now we have the evidence, Amira said, her voice steady. We can expose her. Reece looked up at her, and for the first time in days, there was a spark of hope in his eyes. You just saved me. We're not done yet, Amira said. We need to get these to someone who can help us. A lawyer, the press, someone who can blow this wide open before Nina realizes what we're doing. Reece nodded, his resolve hardening. I know someone. My dad's old lawyer, David Mercer. He's one of the few people I trust. Then let's go, Amira said, her breath visible in the freezing air. We're finishing this tonight. As they left the storage unit and locked the door behind them, Amira felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were walking into a battle against a powerful enemy, but for the first time she felt like they had a fighting chance, and no matter what happened, she wasn't going to let Nina win. The ride to David Mercer's office was tense, the hum of the car engine the only sound between them. Reece gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and Amira sat with the stack of incriminating documents clutched in her lap. Her heart thumped loudly, but her resolve was solid. She wouldn't let fear paralyze her now. The city outside was quiet for a Friday night, the streets slick from a light drizzle. The soft glow of streetlights reflected off the pavement, casting fleeting shadows across their faces as they sped through intersections. Amira stared out the window, her thoughts swirling like the rain trickling down the glass. Nina wouldn't see this coming. That gave them a small advantage, but she also knew that once they made their move, Nina would retaliate. They had to be ready for that. We're here, Reece said softly, pulling into the parking lot of a modest brick building. The lights were still on inside, a testament to David Mercer's reputation for working late. Reece cut the engine and turned to Amira, his eyes dark with emotion. Are you sure you want to do this? She met his gaze without hesitation. I've never been more sure of anything. They entered the building, the faint scent of coffee and old leather filling the air. David Mercer's office was on the second floor, a small but well-maintained space filled with bookshelves and framed legal awards. The man himself, a balding attorney with a sharp gaze and a calm demeanour, looked up from his desk as they entered. Reece, Mercer said, standing and offering a firm handshake. It's been a while. It has, Reece replied, his voice thick with emotion. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. Mercer's gaze shifted to Amira, and he gave her a polite nod. And you must be the woman who's been keeping him grounded. I've heard about you. Amira forced a small smile, but she wasted no time getting to the point. Mr. Mercer, we need your help. We have evidence that could expose Nina Andrews for corporate sabotage and fraud. Mercer's brow furrowed and he gestured for them to sit. Tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Amira and Reece laid out the entire story. Reece's father's debts, Nina's manipulation of Parker Financial, and the carefully orchestrated collapse of the merger. When Amira handed him the printed emails, Mercer's expression darkened as he read through them, his lips pressing into a thin line. This is substantial, he finally said, setting the papers down. If we present this evidence correctly, Nina Andrews won't just face a financial investigation. She could be looking at criminal charges. Reece exhaled sharply, as if the weight of the past year had finally cracked him open. What do we do next? I'll reach out to my contacts at the Securities and Exchange Commission and the media, Mercer replied. We need to hit her from both sides, legal and public. She can't silence both at once. Amira nodded, but a new thought gnawed at her. What about retaliation? Nina knows how to play dirty. If she finds out we're coming for her, she won't sit back quietly. Mercer tapped his fingers against the desk thoughtfully. She'll try to discredit you both, maybe even fabricate evidence to muddy the waters. But if we move fast enough, she won't have time to act. Timing is everything. Reece leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. How fast are we talking? By tomorrow morning, I'll have filed a formal complaint with the SEC, Mercer assured them, and by the time she wakes up, the press will already be knocking on her door. Amira's stomach twisted with a mix of anxiety and determination. And if she comes after us, we stay ahead of her, Mercer said firmly. She's powerful, but she's not untouchable. They left the office with a renewed sense of purpose, but also the weight of what they had just set into motion. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. As they walked back to the car, Reece suddenly stopped and turned to Amira. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, she said softly. Just promise me you'll do the right thing from now on. He nodded, swallowing hard. I will. They drove back to her apartment in silence, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, Reece lingered by the door, as if unsure whether he should leave or stay. Amira hesitated for a moment before opening the door wider. You can stay for a bit if you want. He followed her inside and they sat on the couch, the weight of the night pressing down on them. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Reece broke the silence. I was afraid this would destroy us. Amira stared at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. It almost did. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away gently, looking at him with tear-filled eyes. I'm helping you because I believe you deserve a second chance, not because everything's forgiven. I don't know if we can fix us, Reece, but right now, I'm more concerned with making sure Nina doesn't ruin your life any further. I understand, he said, his voice thick with emotion, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. No more lies, no more secrets. She nodded, but her heart was too bruised to offer him anything more than that. For now, their focus had to be on taking down Nina. The rest, the healing, the forgiveness, if it ever came, would have to wait. As the city outside began to wind down for the night, Amira leaned back on the couch and closed her eyes. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time she felt like they had a fighting chance to make it through. And this time, she wasn't going to let anyone take away her control. Morning came with a surge of adrenaline, and Amira awoke before the sun fully rose. The sky outside her window was a muted grey, the calm before the storm. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, and for a second she froze, wondering if it was Nina. But when she checked, it was Layla. Hey, Amira said, her voice still groggy but alert. I just saw something, Layla said breathlessly. Check the news, right now. Amira quickly opened a news app on her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. The headline hit her like a punch to the chest. Billionaire investor Nina Andrews under investigation for corporate fraud and sabotage. Beneath it, a photo of Nina appeared, her usual composed expression replaced with one that seemed strained, as if the cracks in her facade were finally showing. They did it, Amira whispered, hardly believing it. Mercer had worked faster than she'd expected. Oh, they did more than that, Layla added, her excitement palpable. They're saying the investigation could expand to cover multiple companies she's been involved with. Girl, This is huge. You and Reece just took down one of the most powerful women in finance. Amira exhaled, the weight of it all hitting her at once. It's not over yet. She's not the kind of person who goes down quietly. No, but you just dealt her a blow she won't recover from anytime soon, Layla said confidently. I'm proud of you. Amira smiled faintly, but the lingering fear gnawed at her. Thanks, Layla. I'll keep you updated. After hanging up, she rushed to the living room, where Reece was already sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His dishevelled hair and wrinkled shirt showed he hadn't slept much, but the look in his eyes was one of relief and disbelief. You saw it? She asked, sitting beside him. He nodded, holding up his phone. Mercer just texted me. The SEC has officially launched the investigation, and they're freezing some of Nina's assets as we speak. For a moment, they sat there in silence, the enormity of what they'd accomplished settling over them like a tidal wave. Then, Reece turned to her, his voice soft. I don't know where I'd be right now if it weren't for you. Amira swallowed the lump in her throat. You would have figured it out, eventually. He shook his head. No, I wouldn't have. I was drowning and I didn't even know how to ask for help. You didn't just save my family's company. You saved me. Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to lean into him, to let him wrap his arms around her and promise her that everything would be okay. But the walls she'd built around her heart wouldn't let her. Not yet. She stood and walked to the window, watching the city come alive below them. What happens now? Reece joined her, standing close but not touching her. I need to clean up the damage, work with Mercer to stabilise what's left of the company, make sure Nina can't come back from this. And us? She asked quietly, her reflection in the window merging with his. There was a pause, heavy and full of meaning. I'll give you the space you need, he said. I know I broke your trust, but I'm not giving up on us. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm not the man who lied to you. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening. I want to believe you. I really do. But it's going to take time. I'm willing to wait, he said, his voice steady. However long it takes. Amira nodded, the vulnerability in his words cutting through her defences, but not enough to tear them down completely. Then, let's focus on rebuilding. You take care of the company and I'll take care of myself. He offered a small, understanding smile. Deal. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Amira's heart jumped, her mind immediately thinking of Nina and possible retaliation. She exchanged a wary glance with Reece before moving cautiously to the door and peeking through the peephole. It wasn't Nina. It was a man in a crisp black suit, holding an envelope in his hand. She opened the door slowly. Ms. Wilson? The man asked. Yes. He handed her the envelope. This is for you. Have a good day. Before she could ask who sent it, he turned and disappeared down the hallway. She shut the door and walked back to the couch, her fingers shaking slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short, handwritten note. This isn't over. There was no signature, but Amira didn't need one to know who it was from. Reece leaned over her shoulder and read the note, his jaw tightening. Nina. Amira folded the paper and set it on the coffee table, her mind racing. She had expected this, but seeing the threat in writing made it feel more real. She's going to come after us, isn't she? She'll try, Reece said, his tone resolute. But she's already lost. Mercer's got the legal side covered, and we've got the evidence to back it up. She's grasping at straws now. Amira nodded, but her instincts warned her that Nina wasn't the type to give up easily. We need to stay ahead of her. No slip-ups. We will, Reece assured her. I promise. As the day stretched on, Amira couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of Nina's retaliation. But she also knew that she wasn't the same woman who had blindly trusted Reece at the start of all this. She had fought back, stood her ground, and helped bring a powerful woman to her knees. She wasn't a victim anymore, and if Nina wanted to come after her, she was ready. By the next morning, the air in Amira's apartment was thick with anticipation. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands as she scrolled through the headlines on her laptop. Every major news outlet had picked up the story Nina Andrews under investigation for corporate misconduct, high-profile businesswoman faces potential fraud charges, and collapse of Parker Financial linked to strategic manipulation. The media frenzy had erupted overnight, just as Mercer predicted, but the threat lingering in the back of Amira's mind was like a splinter she couldn't ignore. Nina's note sat folded on the table, taunting her. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was Mercer. "Good morning, Amira," he said when she answered. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of urgency. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Nina's legal team is fighting back harder than expected. They're claiming the emails were fabricated." Her stomach dropped. "Fabricated, but we have the originals." "Doesn't matter," Mercer replied. "Their strategy is to create doubt. Make it look like you and Reece doctored the evidence to frame her. They're also hinting that they'll push for character attacks, digging into your past, looking for any weaknesses they can exploit." Amira's hand tightened around her phone. "Can they do that? Just make things up?" "They can try," Mercer said calmly, "but we're ready for it. Just be prepared for some noise. The next few days are going to be messy." After hanging up, Amira stared at the phone in her hand, her pulse racing. She had anticipated a backlash, but the idea of Nina digging into her personal life sent a chill down her spine. What could Nina find? There wasn't much. Her life had been relatively ordinary before Reece, but she knew that with enough determination, Nina could twist even the smallest detail into something damaging. Reece emerged from the bedroom, running a hand through his dishevelled hair. "Was that Mercer?" She nodded. "Nina's claiming we faked the emails and they're planning to go after us personally." Reece swore under his breath, pacing the kitchen. "Of course she is. She's desperate." "She's also dangerous," Amira said, pushing her coffee aside. "If she drags this out long enough, she could cause more damage than we're prepared for." Reece stopped pacing and leaned against the counter, his expression hardening. "Then we need to end this quickly." Amira nodded, an idea forming in her mind. "We need something Nina can't deny, something even her lawyers won't be able to spin." Reece crossed the room and sat across from her, his eyes locked on hers. "What are you thinking?" "The offshore bank accounts," she said, her voice steady. "If we can prove that Nina funneled money through hidden accounts to manipulate the merger, it'll be game over. Mercer mentioned the accounts before, but we didn't have access to them." Reece's brow furrowed. "My dad's accountant might know something. He handled all the financial records before and after the merger collapsed." "Then we need to talk to him," Amira said, grabbing her phone and coat. "Let's go." The accountant's office was located in a quiet neighbourhood, tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. The man, a soft-spoken middle-aged professional named Marcus Levin, looked surprised to see them when they arrived. "I didn't expect to hear from you again, Reece," Marcus said as he led them into his office. "What brings you here?" "We need your help," Reece replied. "We're trying to expose Nina Andrews for what she did to my father's company. But we're missing one key piece, proof that she moved funds through offshore accounts." Marcus's expression darkened. "I always had a feeling something shady was going on. After the merger fell apart, a lot of money disappeared, but I couldn't trace it. I didn't have access to those accounts." "But someone did," Amira interjected, leaning forward. There has to be a trail somewhere. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. There might be. Your father kept backup records, physical ledgers that included everything, even transactions that weren't publicly disclosed. If Nina funneled money, those ledgers would show it. Reece's eyes widened. Where are they? In the storage vault at Parker Financial's headquarters, Marcus said, but with the investigation going on, access to the building is restricted. Amira's mind raced, but she didn't hesitate. We'll find a way in. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Amira and Reece arrived at the Parker Financial building. The sleek skyscraper loomed over them, its glass exterior reflecting the city lights like a beacon. They entered through a side entrance using Reece's old employee keycard, which, to their relief, still worked. The building was eerily quiet, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. They made their way to the storage vault in the basement, where rows of locked cabinets lined the walls. Reece scanned the labels until he found the one they were looking for, Parker Financial. Restricted ledgers. He pulled the cabinet open, and Amira's breath hitched as she saw the neatly stacked books. Reece grabbed the ledgers marked with dates that aligned with the merger collapse, flipping through the pages with urgency. Here, he said, pointing to a series of transactions. Large sums of money were withdrawn just before the merger failed. Amira traced the lines with her finger, her pulse racing. And look, these accounts are offshore. Nina's company was the recipient. This is it, Reece whispered. This proves she moved the money to sabotage us. They quickly photographed the pages, ensuring they had multiple copies in case anything happened to the originals. As they packed up, Amira's phone buzzed with a text from Mercer Goodwork today. Stay alert. Things might escalate. The warning sent a chill down her spine, but she forced herself to focus. They had what they needed. Nina's empire was about to crumble. As they exited the building and stepped back into the night, Amira looked up at the towering skyscrapers around them. The city was alive, bustling with noise and light, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. They had fought through the lies, the threats, and the betrayal, and now they held the truth in their hands. Reece reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We're going to win this. Amira nodded, the weight of everything they'd been through pressing on her but not breaking her. Yes, we are. But as they walked toward the car, her eyes flicked to the shadows on the street. Nina wasn't done yet. She could feel it. But this time, Amira wasn't afraid. She was ready. The morning sunlight spilled through the window as Amira sat cross-legged on her living room floor, the photographs of the ledgers spread out before her. She traced her fingers along the lines of numbers, each transaction confirming the manipulation that had destroyed Parker Financial. Reece sat next to her, his head resting in his hands as if the weight of the last few weeks had finally caught up to him. We did it, she whispered, her voice carrying both relief and exhaustion. This is exactly what we needed. Reece lifted his head, offering a faint, tired smile. I just can't believe it's finally over. Or at least it will be once Mercer submits this to the SEC. Amira knew better than to believe it was over. She could still feel the presence of Nina's warning hanging over them like a storm cloud. But this evidence was powerful, undeniable. If Nina tried to fight it, she'd be fighting against cold, hard facts. Just as she was about to suggest calling Mercer, her phone rang. She grabbed it quickly, relief washing over her when she saw his name on the screen. Mercer, she answered, putting the call on speaker so Reece could hear. You've done it, Mercer said, his tone carrying a rare hint of excitement. I just reviewed the documents you sent. This is enough to not only nail Nina for fraud, but also prove her deliberate sabotage of Parker Financial. She's finished. Amira exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time in what felt like forever. So, what happens next? I'm submitting this to the SEC and the authorities immediately, Mercer replied. They'll move fast, especially with the media already covering the initial investigation. Nina won't have time to react. Reece leaned forward, his voice filled with cautious hope. And what about us? Can she still come after us? She can try, Mercer admitted, but she won't have much leverage now. Her credibility is shattered, and the evidence you've gathered will be difficult to discredit. Just stay low and let the legal system do its job. You've done everything right. Amira thanked him and ended the call, her fingers still clutching the phone as she stared at it. A part of her expected Nina to burst through the door or for another cryptic note to arrive, but the silence was almost unsettling. It's really happening, Reece said softly as if he couldn't quite believe it. We're finally free of her. Amira nodded, but deep down she wasn't fully convinced. I just don't trust her to give up without a fight. Reece reached for her hand, his warmth grounding her. Whatever she tries next, we'll face it together. Later that evening, Amira stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like stars below her. The room was quiet, except for the sound of Reece shuffling papers on the kitchen counter. He was preparing everything for the legal team, meticulously organising the evidence they'd collected. Amira's thoughts drifted to the past few weeks. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and the battle to uncover the truth. She had faced Nina's intimidation, walked through the ruins of her relationship with Reece, and emerged stronger than she'd ever thought possible. But as much as she wanted to feel victorious, she couldn't shake the lingering tension in her chest. Her phone vibrated on the windowsill and she hesitated before picking it up. It was another unknown number. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but something compelled her to answer. Hello? There was a brief pause, and then Nina's voice came through, calm and eerily composed. I'm impressed, Amira. You've managed to do what most people couldn't. But don't think this is the end. Amira's grip tightened around the phone. It's over, Nina. The SEC has the evidence, and you're finished. Nina laughed softly, the sound chilling. I'm not so easily finished, dear. You may have won this round, but you've made a powerful enemy, and powerful enemies don't just disappear. Amira's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Is that a threat? No, Nina replied, her voice smooth. It's a promise. But don't worry, I won't waste my time trying to destroy you directly. I prefer a more elegant approach. Amira's jaw tightened. We're not afraid of you anymore. Good, Nina said. Fear is overrated anyway. But mark my words, Amira. One day, when you least expect it, I'll remind you of what happens when you cross someone like me. The call ended abruptly, leaving Amira staring at her phone in disbelief. Her chest heaved as she tried to process Nina's cryptic warning. What is it? Reece asked, walking over when he saw the panic in her eyes. It was her, Amira said, her voice barely above a whisper. She's not done. Reece pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she buried her face in his chest. His heartbeat was steady, a comforting rhythm against her ear. Let her talk. She's bluffing. Amira wanted to believe that, but she knew better. Nina wasn't the type to bluff, but even as the fear crept through her, a spark of defiance burned within her. She had faced Nina once, and won. If she had to do it again, she would. I'm not going to let her control us, Amira whispered, no matter what she tries. Reece kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. We won't let her. For now, the battle was over, but Amira knew that life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges, and when Nina's shadow inevitably loomed again, she'd be ready. This wasn't the ending, it was just a new beginning. A week passed, and the chaos surrounding Nina's downfall continued to ripple through the media. Headlines shifted from covering the initial investigation to stories about her hidden financial dealings and insider betrayals. Every day brought a new revelation, each one stripping Nina of her power, piece by piece. Amira followed the coverage closely, but she had also started focusing on rebuilding her life. She spent her days catching up on work, regaining control of her wedding planning business, and reconnecting with friends she had distanced herself from during the turmoil. Layla had taken her out for coffee the day before, and their laughter had felt like a balm for Amira's frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. But Reece was never far from her thoughts. Their relationship had shifted into a delicate balance, neither fully together nor completely apart. He texted her often, little messages checking in, but he never pushed. She appreciated that. It gave her time to sort through her feelings. Late one evening, as she sat on the balcony of her apartment, sipping tea and watching the lights of the city skyline, her phone buzzed with another message from him. "Can we meet? Just for a walk." Amira stared at the screen for a moment before typing back, "Okay." They met at the park, the same place where they'd had their emotional confrontation not long ago. But tonight, the air was different. The cold breeze was gentler, and the noise of the city faded into the background as they walked along the dimly lit path. Neither of them spoke at first. Reece walked with his hands in his pockets, glancing at her every few moments as if he were trying to gauge her mood. Amira focused on the sound of their footsteps, the rhythm calming her nerves. Finally, she broke the silence. "How's everything going with the company?" "Better," he replied, his voice soft. "Mercer's helping me rebuild, and we've already started reaching out to new investors. It's going to take time, but we'll get there." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "I'm glad." He exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cool air. "Amira, I know you're still hurting. I know I broke your trust. But I meant it when I said I'd do whatever it takes to make things right." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "I know you did, and I believe you. But this isn't something that can be fixed overnight." "I understand," he said, his voice steady but filled with vulnerability. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me all at once. I'm just asking for a chance, one step at a time." Amira's heart ached, torn between the love she still felt for him and the scars his betrayal had left behind. But as she stood there, with the city lights flickering in the distance and the man she had fought so hard to save standing before her, she realized something important. She wasn't the same woman who had been blindsided by betrayal. She had faced her pain, fought her way through it, and come out stronger. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for healing. For both of them. "I can't promise you anything," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But I'm willing to take that first step." Relief washed over his face, and he nodded. "That's all I need." They continued walking, their conversation shifting to lighter topics, memories of their early days, dreams they had once shared. The laughter they thought they had lost began to resurface, cautious but genuine. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As they reached the edge of the park, Amira paused, looking up at the stars scattered across the sky. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said quietly. Reece followed her gaze. "Neither am I." And in that moment, they both understood that while their journey wasn't over, they had survived the worst of it. The rest they would figure out together, one step, one breath, and one act of trust at a time. The city buzzed around them, but for Amira the noise faded into the background. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time in a long time she was okay with that.